A grandmother was close to getting out of a bad relationship when this happened.
It was a quiet February morning in Atlanta, Georgia, when tragedy struck a woman who had given so much of herself to the people she loved. Samantha Boseman, a 51-year-old grandmother known for her warmth, strength, and resilience, had finally decided to walk away from a toxic relationship that had drained her emotionally. She had stood her ground, made her decision, and taken her life back. But that choice, an act of courage, would ultimately cost her everything. Just days earlier, Samantha had ended her 4-year relationship with Maxwell Lartery, a man 18 years her junior, who had refused to contribute to the household and increasingly relied on her generosity. Friends and family say Samantha was exhausted, emotionally tired from being manipulated and pressured by someone who never met her halfway. She had housed him, supported him, and even shared her life with him. But enough was enough. She wanted peace. She wanted her space. And for the first time in a long while, she was standing firmly in her power. But as many survivors of domestic abuse know, leaving is often the most dangerous time. Samantha's story, tragically, is no exception. Maxwell didn't take the breakup well. And on the morning of February 5th, 2024, he returned to her home, not to apologize, not to make peace, but to make good on his deadly threats. As he stood on her doorstep, his voice was laced with menace. "If you come outside, I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to shoot your house," he warned. And then, moments later, he did just that. In a terrifying sequence captured by Samantha's Ring doorbell camera, Maxwell fired 4 rounds through her front door. Glass shattered. Screams echoed. Samantha was struck 3 times. The attack was sudden, cold, and brutal. She collapsed in her kitchen, mortally wounded inside the very home she had fought to protect. The door was locked. She had tried to keep him out. But even a locked door could not shield her from the violence she feared would come. Maxwell didn't stick around. He fled the scene and drove across town. In a disturbing twist, he reportedly stopped at a Hooters restaurant later that day, trying to establish an alibi, as if her life hadn't just been extinguished by his hand. While Samantha's body lay inside her home, growing cold, he was already preparing to hide from the consequences. Neighbors were the first to notice something was wrong. The shattered glass, the eerie silence, the unease in the air. It wasn't long before police were called and Samantha's lifeless body was found. She had been left to die alone. A woman who once opened her home and her heart to someone who said he loved her was ultimately met with betrayal at the barrel of a gun. This wasn't a random act of violence. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was intimate partner violence, a kind of evil that so often hides in plain sight. It's the kind that whispers threats behind closed doors, the kind that manipulates, isolates, and gradually tightens its grip until the victim feels there's no way out. But Samantha had found a way out. She had chosen herself. And that's what makes her death all the more heartbreaking. What makes this story even more chilling is that it was all caught on camera. The Ring footage became the strongest evidence in the case. You could hear the tension in Maxwell's voice, see the escalation, feel the fear. Technology became Samantha's final witness, recording the very moment her life was stolen. In March 2025, justice was served. Maxwell Lartery was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole, plus additional years. But no sentence could bring Samantha back. No verdict could mend the hearts of the daughters who lost their mother, or the grandchildren who lost the woman who raised them. This video is more than just a retelling of a tragic event. It's a memorial to Samantha Boseman, a woman of strength, love, and courage. And it's a reminder that we must listen to the signs, believe survivors, and do more to protect them when they say, "I'm done." Because sometimes saying, "I'm done" is the bravest and most dangerous thing a person can do. Samantha Boseman was more than just a headline of a tragic news story. She was a vibrant, giving, and deeply loving woman. At 51 years old, she had lived a life shaped by devotion to her family and an unshakable sense of responsibility. She wasn't loud or flashy. She led with compassion, with steady hands and a nurturing heart. Friends and family describe her as a woman who would give without hesitation, even when she didn't have much for herself. She was a grandmother, a mother, and a caretaker, not just in title, but in the very way she moved through the world. Samantha raised her children with intention, always placing their needs above her own. When life presented her with the opportunity to adopt and raise her grandchildren, she didn't think twice. She embraced the responsibility with grace, creating a home filled with laughter, lessons, and love. Samantha was the kind of person who opened her door to others, literally and emotionally. She was a helper in her circle, the one you could lean on during hard times. She wasn't just someone who talked about being there for people. She showed up again and again, even when it cost her sleep, comfort, or peace of mind. She had a soft voice and a strong presence, and people naturally gravitated toward her warmth. Like many women of quiet resilience, Samantha had known her share of life's struggles, but she didn't complain. Instead, she carried her burdens with dignity, often shielding those she loved from the full weight of what she was going through. When she entered a relationship with Maxwell Lartery, she hoped for a partner, someone to share life with, not someone to carry. But as time passed, it became clear that she was giving far more than she was receiving. Even then, she was patient. She supported him and tried to help him find his way. She gave him the benefit of the doubt, as many loving people do. But over time, the relationship took a toll on her spirit. Financial strain, emotional manipulation, and the slow erosion of peace began to push against the life she had built. Yet Samantha remained calm and quiet about her suffering. She didn't make a scene. She simply decided she deserved better. And that's when everything changed. Her decision to end the relationship was not just an ending. It was a beginning. It was Samantha choosing herself, perhaps for the first time in a long while. It was an act of bravery, rooted in love, not only for herself, but for her grandchildren who depended on her. She wanted a life free of chaos, a space where she could breathe, rest, and enjoy the family she had worked so hard to nurture. It was a hopeful moment, a moment of reclaiming. Samantha Boseman's life was about more than how it ended. Her legacy is one of love and care. Her story is a reminder that behind every victim is a full, rich life, a life that mattered. As we continue to tell her story, we do so not to sensationalize her death, but to honor her life. The woman behind the door was strong, kind, and deeply human, and she deserves to be remembered that way. When Samantha Boseman entered into a relationship with Maxwell Lartery, she likely did so with hope in her heart. Like many people, she wanted companionship, a partner who would share life's burdens, bring joy, and stand beside her. In the beginning, it might have felt like that was possible. But over time, what started as affection began to reveal troubling patterns, slowly shifting the relationship into something toxic.
Was close to getting out of a bad relationship when this happened.
She had shut and locked her front door, and he shot 4 times through her front door, hitting her 3 times.
Samantha Boseman tried to close the door on her 4-year relationship with Maxwell Lartery, and in retaliation, he fired a gun through her front door, captured on Ring video, and killed her.
And there's another video that I have where he's saying, if you come outside, I'm gonna shoot your house.
Who say Max Lartery fired 4 shots through the door, and 3 of them struck Samantha Boseman, mortally wounding her. Trial prosecutors say Lartery, 33 at the time of the shooting, had not been contributing to the household bills and wanted Ms. Boseman, 51 at the time, to give up custody of 2 of her grandchildren, whom she had adopted.
Maxwell was 33 years old, nearly 2 decades younger than Samantha. While age alone doesn't determine the health of a relationship, in this case, it became part of a broader pattern. Friends and family noted that Maxwell was never truly independent. He didn't contribute financially to the household. He leaned on Samantha for everything: housing, food, daily needs, and never seemed to step up as a partner. Instead, he took, and when Samantha began to draw boundaries, he responded with pressure and manipulation. One of the most insidious forms of abuse Samantha experienced was economic abuse, a kind that often goes unnoticed, but can be just as damaging as physical violence. Maxwell relied on her financially while making her feel guilty for wanting stability. He demanded that she relinquish custody of her 2 adopted grandchildren, threatening her role as their caregiver. For Samantha, this wasn't just emotional blackmail. It was a direct attack on her identity as a mother figure, her deepest source of pride and love. There was also emotional abuse. According to her family, Maxwell had a way of making Samantha feel small, as if her needs and voice didn't matter. He used anger and intimidation, and when she tried to speak up, he shut her down. The relationship became one-sided, not a partnership. But a situation where Samantha was constantly giving while Maxwell took control through fear and manipulation. What makes this kind of abuse so dangerous is that it often escalates quietly. There may be no bruises, no visible wounds, but the victim begins to lose pieces of herself little by little. Samantha had been strong for so long, supporting him while raising children, working, and maintaining her household. But eventually, she realized that strength shouldn't mean suffering. She recognized the signs and made the incredibly brave decision to walk away. Ending an abusive relationship is one of the most courageous things a person can do, especially when the abuse is subtle and psychological. Samantha's decision to leave wasn't impulsive. It was thoughtful, deliberate, and rooted in self-respect. She had had enough. Enough of the financial burden. Enough of the emotional strain. Enough of being made to feel like she didn't matter. She was ready to reclaim her life, and that decision marked a turning point. Sadly, Samantha's story also highlights a grim reality, that choosing to leave is often the moment when abusers become most dangerous. Maxwell could not handle losing control, and when Samantha asserted her independence, he didn't let go. He retaliated in the most violent way possible. But in telling this part of her story, we honor her bravery. We recognize her strength not just in enduring the abuse, but in finally saying no more. And that decision deserves to be remembered with the dignity she lived by. By the time Samantha Boseman ended her relationship with Maxwell Lartery, it wasn't a sudden decision. It was a choice that came after years of giving, enduring, and hoping things might change. She had reached her emotional limit. She had seen enough red flags. And most importantly, she had begun to believe that she deserved better. Her words to her daughter were simple but firm. "I'm done." It was the kind of finality that comes only when someone has truly had enough. Samantha's decision wasn't just about ending a relationship. It was about reclaiming her peace. She had spent years balancing the responsibilities of raising grandchildren, maintaining her home, and supporting a man who had contributed little and demanded much. Saying goodbye to Maxwell was her way of protecting not just herself, but also the stability of the children who depended on her. She was choosing calm over chaos and self-respect over fear. But as is often the case in abusive relationships, leaving doesn't always mean the danger is over. In fact, for many survivors, the moment they decide to walk away is when they face the greatest risk. Maxwell did not accept the breakup. He didn't leave quietly. He returned to Samantha's home, uninvited and angry, carrying not only a gun, but a rage of a man who had lost control over the person he once manipulated. On the morning of February 5th, 2024, Samantha was inside her home, her sanctuary, when Maxwell showed up at her door. The Ring doorbell camera, which he had wisely installed, recorded everything. He stood outside yelling. His voice grew louder, more aggressive. "If you come outside, I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to shoot your house," he threatened. It was a chilling moment, made even more horrifying by the fact that Samantha didn't open the door. She was trying to stay safe. And yet, her locked door wasn't enough to protect her. In an act of cold-blooded violence, Maxwell raised his gun and fired 4 shots directly through the door. Glass shattered. The bullets tore through the barrier that stood between Samantha and the danger she feared. 3 of them hit her. Inside her own home, where she had once nurtured, protected, and hoped, Samantha fell to the ground, fatally wounded. She died in the very place where she had finally tried to find peace. After the shooting, Maxwell didn't call for help. He didn't turn himself in. He drove away and, in a disturbing attempt to create an alibi, made a stop at a local Hooters restaurant. While Samantha lay alone, bleeding on the kitchen floor, the man who had just ended her life was already trying to erase his involvement, as if her life and her death meant nothing. This moment, her final day, is heartbreaking, but it also reveals Samantha's strength and clarity. She did everything she could to remove herself from harm. She stood her ground. She tried to protect herself and her family. Her final act was not one of weakness, but of immense courage. Though her life was cut short in an act of senseless violence, the strength she showed in her final days will forever be remembered. Her story is not just one of loss. It's one of bravery, dignity, and love. The quiet on Samantha Boseman Street was shattered not just by the sound of gunfire, but by the ripple of shock that followed. Neighbors who had known her as a kind and steady presence were jolted into fear and confusion. Many had heard the shots. Some had seen Maxwell pacing in front of her home. But no one imagined that behind Samantha's closed door, a tragedy had already unfolded, and that she was lying there, shot and alone. When the police arrived, the scene was haunting. Broken glass littered the porch. The door was riddled with bullet holes. Shell casings lay scattered near the entrance. There was no sign of forced entry, just the brutal evidence of shots fired through the door itself. Inside, Samantha was found in the kitchen, her body crumpled and still. There was no chaos, no struggle, just a terrible silence that settled over the place she once called home. Investigators quickly began piecing together what had happened. The Ring doorbell camera provided crucial footage. Maxwell's voice, his threats, the sound of gunfire. The camera had captured the very moment her life was taken, leaving no doubt about what had occurred. It was chilling, but also powerfully clear. In a way, Samantha had ensured her own voice would be heard, even in death, because the truth was recorded. The coroner later revealed that Samantha may have survived for some time after shooting. It's possible that if help had arrived sooner, she might have been saved. That detail made the pain even harder for her loved ones to bear. Knowing that she may have suffered alone in her final moments was a heartbreaking layer added to an already devastating story. Her daughter would later share that this thought haunted her every day. Meanwhile, Maxwell was on the move. He made no effort to help, to call 911, or to take responsibility. Instead, he tried to establish an alibi, stopping at a Hooters restaurant as if nothing had happened. That level of coldness, of premeditation and distance, shocked even the investigators. It painted a clear picture of someone who did not act out of sudden rage, but with calculated intent and a complete lack of remorse. News of Samantha's death spread quickly, and with it came waves of grief and disbelief. For her family, there was no way to make sense of it. How could a woman who gave so much be taken so violently? How could someone she once trusted end her life so carelessly? The pain was raw, and the loss immeasurable. Her children were left without a mother, her grandchildren without their guiding light. Her home, once a place of safety, became a site of unbearable memory. Yet in the midst of sorrow, her story also stirred something deeper in the hearts of those who heard it. Samantha's death was not just a tragedy. It was a wake-up call. It reminded us all that domestic violence is not always loud or visible. Sometimes it hides behind closed doors. Sometimes it wears a smile, and sometimes it ends in silence. But Samantha's story refuses to be silenced. In the aftermath of her death, her voice, captured in the echoes of a camera and the memories of those who loved her, continues to speak. In the days that followed Samantha Boseman's death, law enforcement acted swiftly. The evidence was clear, damning, and deeply disturbing. Thanks to the Ring doorbell footage and eyewitness accounts, Maxwell Lardy was arrested and charged with her murder. There was no denying what had happened. His threats, his actions, and the tragic result were all captured on video. It was now up to the justice system to speak on Samantha's behalf. Prosecutors moved forward with determination. They knew they weren't just trying a case. They were representing a woman whose voice had been taken. They presented the footage in court, letting the jury see and hear what Samantha experienced in her final moments. The audio captured Maxwell's chilling threats. The video showed the exact moment he fired through her door. There was no ambiguity, no confusion, only a horrifying truth. Maxwell's defense attempted to create doubt. At one point, he claimed to have been at a Hooters restaurant during the time of the shooting, trying to use it as an alibi. But technology once again told the truth. Surveillance footage from the restaurant, GPS data, and his own appearance on the Ring camera shattered that lie. The jury saw through the deception. What unfolded in that courtroom was not just about facts. It was about holding someone accountable for a life taken far too soon. Throughout the trial, Samantha's family sat with quiet strength. Her daughters, still grieving, attended each session with heavy hearts. They had already lost so much, but they wanted to see justice carried through. Their pain was visible, but so was their resilience. They listened as their mother's final moments were replayed, cried as they remembered her laughter, and waited for the verdict that would give them some small measure of peace. When the jury returned its decision in March 2025, it was unanimous. Maxwell Lartery was found guilty of murder and related charges. The court sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole, plus 5 additional years for weapons charges, and 10 more years on probation if ever released. The sentence would not bring Samantha back, but was a strong acknowledgement of the gravity of his actions and the value of her life. Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis spoke out after the sentencing, expressing her frustration and heartbreak over the number of women being buried because of intimate partner violence. She didn't mince words. "We are tired of burying women," she said. Her words struck a chord with many, especially those who knew the depth of Samantha's heart and the strength it took for her to say, "I'm done." In that courtroom, justice was served, but the ache of loss remains. Samantha's family must go on without her hugs, her laughter, her steady love. Still, they can now hold on to the knowledge that the man who took her life is no longer free to hurt anyone else. And while no sentence can undo the pain or bring full healing, this verdict honored her memory by affirming what her loved ones already knew, that Samantha Boseman mattered, that her life was precious, and that her voice, though silenced, was still heard. In the wake of the verdict, the voices of those closest to Samantha Boseman rang out, not in anger, but in grief, love, and quiet strength. Her daughters, still navigating the deep loss of their mother, stepped forward with bravery that echoed the resilience Samantha had modeled for them throughout her life. They spoke at the sentencing, not to seek vengeance, but to paint a full picture of the woman they had lost, a mother who sang in the car, who comforted them when they were sick, who cheered for them at every milestone. One of her daughters stood before the court, her voice trembling but steady. "My mom was everything to me," she said. She didn't deserve to be taken like this. She didn't deserve to be afraid in her own home. Her words cut to the heart of the tragedy, not just the loss of life, but the fear, the trauma, and the irreversible harm that rippled through the family. Her pain was palpable, but so was her courage. It was a moment of raw truth that left few dry eyes in the courtroom. Samantha's brother also addressed the court. He spoke of her kindness, her joy, and her quiet strength. "She was always the one who showed up," he said. "For birthdays, for tough times, for everything. She was our anchor. And now there's a space no one can fill." His grief was matched with gratitude for the investigators who pursued justice, for the community that rallied, and for the memory of his sister that he vowed would never fade. District Attorney Fonnie Willis, who had personally worked on the case, expressed both heartbreak and determination. She commended Samantha for trying to leave the relationship, for setting boundaries and seeking safety. "Samantha did everything we tell women to do," Willis said, "and still her life was taken."
A family now has justice after their loved one was shot and killed by an abusive boyfriend. Good evening, I'm George Estevez.
Glad you're here with us. I'm Linda Stouffer. This is video of that shooting. The victim was inside her home when her boyfriend of 4 years fired through the door, killing her. Channel 2 investigative reporter Mark Winnie is live at the Fulton County DA's Domestic Violence Division. Mark, you found out how the killer tried to cover his tracks.
Yeah, Cassie Hall, the lead prosecutor on the case, says domestic abuse can take many forms. Part of the reason the Fulton County DA's office has an entire division devoted to domestic violence, and in this case, there is economic abuse, but then physical violence, murder.
I just was broken, completely broken, shattered.
We're tired of burying our women to abusers.
I break down and cry every single day. Some days I don't even want to go on.
It's like, okay, you guilty. Dang, my mom still is not gonna hug me. And my mom's still not here. But he
He needs to be locked up.
Samantha Boseman tried to close the door on her 4-year relationship with Maxwell Lartery, and in retaliation, he fired a gun through her front door, captured on Ring video, and killed her. Say Fulton County Chief Senior Assistant District Attorneys Cassie Hall and Christina Robinson.
And there's another video that I have where he's saying, if you come outside, I'm gonna shoot you. I'm gonna shoot your house.
Who say Max Lartery fired 4 shots through the door, and 3 of them struck Samantha Boseman, mortally wounding her.
Is there a lesson for others in troubled relationships? I would say yes. I would say knowing enough is enough.
Ms. Hall and Ms. Robinson say earlier this month a jury convicted Lartery of murder and more. And Senior Judge David Emerson sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole, plus 5 years, plus 10 years probation if he ever made parole.
She's a beautiful spirit, just happy, joyful. She'll get on you if she had to, but she was just a happy, helping person.
The 2 trial prosecutors say Lartery, 33 at the time of the shooting, had not been contributing to the household bills and wanted Ms. Boseman, 51 at the time, to give up custody of 2 of her grandchildren, whom she had adopted. Zipporah Ferguson says shortly before the shooting, her mom came to Ms. Ferguson's job crying.
She was like, I'm done with him, and everything like that.
Prosecutors say Atlanta police, alerted by neighbors who heard gunshots earlier in the day and had not been able to reach Ms. Boseman on her phone for hours, arrived to find shattered glass and shell casings. And in her kitchen, police found Samantha Boseman dead, though she had been alive and bleeding for some time and might have lived if Lartery had called for help soon after the shooting.
He's walking down the street calling her out of her name. He's still making threats.
Instead, Ms. Robinson and Ms. Hall say Lartery traveled about Metro Atlanta, trying to establish an alibi, finishing the night at a Hooters, though by that time her death had been discovered hours earlier. District Attorney Fonnie Willis.
As this grandmother lay and bleed out in her very home, he was gallivanting all through the town, ending his night at a Hooters. It's just a horrible disregard for life.
People think of domestic violence as just physical, but it can be economic abuse. He wasn't paying bills. He wasn't being a responsible male.
She was able to be financially stable, travel around a lot, and she just wanted to genuinely help Max.
Now, spokesman said the Fulton County Public Defender's Office represented Mr. Lartery, though we must decline additional comments as a motion for a new trial has been filed. We use imagery obtained through the Fulton County District Attorney's Office and the family for this story. Reporting live at the Domestic Violence Division for the DA's office, Mark Winnie.
That's why we will keep fighting, because this cannot keep happening. Her voice carried the weight of countless similar cases and the urgency of systemic change. The prosecuting attorneys echoed those sentiments. For them, this case was deeply personal, not just because of brutality, but because of how preventable it was. Domestic violence is not private when it ends in public tragedy. One prosecutor stated, "We want people to see Samantha's story and understand the signs, to speak up, to believe survivors, and to never ignore warning signs, even when they seem small." Community members also came forward. Friends and co-workers remembered Samantha as a bright light, reliable, joyful, and incredibly devoted to her children. Candlelight vigils were held in her memory, where neighbors shared stories and lit candles not only for Samantha, but for all women who have suffered in silence. The warmth and support from her community were a testament to how deeply she had touched those around her. In the end, the voices that rose after Samantha's death were not silenced. They grew stronger. They became advocates, storytellers, and protectors. They now speak not only for Samantha, but for every woman who's ever feared for her life behind closed doors. Samantha's legacy lives on in those voices, in the pursuit of justice, in the push for prevention, and in the hope that no more families will have to feel this kind of pain again. With Derek Harris now serving his sentence, one chapter of this heartbreaking story is closed, but many lingering questions remain. The legal outcome brought a measure of justice, yet it did not erase the pain or fill the void left by Samantha Boseman's loss. Her family is still in the long, uncertain process of healing, try to make sense of how such tragedy unfolded right in front of them, and how it could have been prevented. The children Samantha left behind are now being cared for by extended family members. These guardians, while full of love and commitment, are navigating the complex emotional terrain of supporting children through trauma and loss. They have had to become sources of stability while carrying their own grief. Counseling and community support have been instrumental, but the long-term effects of such a violent and public loss remain deeply concerning. One of the most pressing unanswered questions is, how did the system fail Samantha? She had taken the steps society often encourages. She reported abuse. She attempted to leave. She even filed a restraining order. Yet despite all of this, the man who hurt her was still able to find her. This raises hard questions about the effectiveness of protective measures for victims of domestic violence, and whether more could or should have been done to ensure her safety. Advocates and legal professionals have begun analyzing the case to see where interventions may have fallen short. Could more consistent monitoring of Harris have helped? Should more resources have been offered to Samantha, such as emergency housing or increased police presence? These are the uncomfortable but necessary conversations being had behind the scenes by those working to prevent future tragedies. There's also the matter of community responsibility. Neighbors and friends sometimes sense when something is wrong but aren't sure how, or whether, to intervene. In Samantha's case, those close to her noted signs of fear and distress in the months leading up to her death. While no one is to blame except the abuser, the case has sparked conversations about how communities can better support victims and recognize red flags before it's too late. On a broader level, the case has highlighted how domestic violence often escalates when victims try to leave. This reality challenges a common advice to just walk away and underscores the need for holistic, well-coordinated safety plans. Law enforcement, social workers, legal advocates, and even employers must be involved in helping survivors leave violent situations safely and permanently. Though the trial is over, the story is not finished. Samantha's memory continues to fuel efforts to protect others, and her loved ones are determined to speak out, not just in sorrow, but in hope. Hope that others can be saved. Hope that the cracks in the system will be filled. And hope that Samantha's life, though tragically cut short, will light a path toward a safer future for others walking a similar road. Samantha Boseman's story is not just one of tragedy. It's also a call to all of us, a call to listen more closely, to pay more attention to signs of distress in our loved ones, and to take action when we see someone living in fear. Her case reminds us that domestic violence doesn't just happen in private. It echoes through families, neighborhoods, and entire communities. And the only way to truly prevent such heartbreak is by facing it together, openly and without judgment. Community support is a powerful tool. Whether the neighbor checking in, a friend offering a safe place, or an organization providing shelter and legal assistance, these collective efforts can make a life-saving difference. Local shelters, advocacy centers, and hotlines are lifelines that rely on community funding and volunteers to keep their doors open. Supporting these groups, financially or with your time, can mean the difference between hope and despair for someone in crisis. Education is another key part of the solution. We must teach young people what healthy relationships look like and empower them with tools to recognize manipulation, control, and abuse. Schools, churches, and even workplaces can be active allies by hosting workshops and promoting resources. When we reduce the stigma around seeking help, we make it safer for survivors to come forward before it's too late. For those who suspect someone they care about may be in danger, the most important thing you can do is listen without judgment. Offer support, not pressure. Let them know they're not alone, and help connect them to trained professionals who can guide them through their options safely. Sometimes, just knowing someone cares can give survivor the courage they need to take the next step. Samantha's life mattered. Her story has touched hearts far beyond her community, and now, it's our responsibility to honor her by ensuring others don't face the same fate. Together, we can build a world where safety and dignity are the norm, not the exception. Her voice may be gone, but her legacy can still save lives, if we're willing to act. As we close the chapter on the story of Samantha Boseman, our hearts are heavy. This was not just a headline or a court case. It was a young woman's life, full of dreams, laughter, and love for her children. Samantha's journey reminds us of the silent battles so many fight behind closed doors. And her story pushes us to be more aware, more compassionate, and more courageous in standing up for those who cannot always stand for themselves. Her loss leaves behind deep pain, especially for her family, her daughters, and the community that loved her. But it also leaves behind a lesson, a reminder that we must never ignore the warning signs of abuse or take lightly the words, "I'm scared." In Samantha's memory, we are called to act, to speak up, and to protect. Every time we tell stories like this, we create space for understanding and change. By sharing Samantha's truth, we hope to prevent future tragedies and bring more light into the shadows where so many victims still live. Let her name be a symbol not of how her life ended, but of the strength it takes to break away and the community effort it takes to make sure that break is safe. If you or someone you know is facing domestic abuse, please know, help is out there. You are not alone, and you don't have to suffer in silence. Reach out to a trusted friend, call a local hotline, or find a shelter near you. There are people who care and who will walk with you towards safety. To our viewers, thank you for spending this time with us and for giving your attention to this important story. We ask that you don't let Samantha's story stop with you. Share it. Talk about it with friends. Use it as a way to raise awareness in your community. You never know who might be silently watching and desperately needing to hear this message. If this video moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue telling real stories that matter, stories that don't just inform, but inspire action. When you share this content, you help save lives and spark conversations that matter. And finally, let's honor Samantha Boseman, not just with our words, but with our actions. Let's be the friend who checks in, the neighbor who speaks up, the community that refuses to look away. Together, we can make sure her light continues to shine and her legacy lives on in every life we help protect.